Hey, Pete here for Studio Life today, and as you can see by the microphone and the guitar and the interface, I am doing some last-minute overdubbing in my song here. So I have 4 days left to complete this. So today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing a static mix. That is a rough mix with no automation, but just to get all of my levels right, to add in my effects, to do my editing, so that by the end of this video, we'll have a song that is going to be sounding pretty close to done. And then we can come back and do our final mix and our master and release in the next 4 days. So am I going to make it in time? I don't know. Tune in and find out. So let's get started and get this static mix done. Let's go. Okay, here we are back in our mix here of For the Birds in GarageBand on the iPhone this time around. And what I'm going to be doing today is a static mix. In fact, I've done most of the static mix already because part of what I've been doing throughout this whole series is mixing as I go, and this is the recommended way that I use to mix a track, which means that as you go along, you'll see here that we've got our mix about ready. Now, some people will say, okay, you've done all your tracks, you've recorded all your tracks, now put all your faders back to 0 and start again, and bring everything up and balance your drums, and then your bass, and then your guitar, and then your vocals. I figure I've done all of that throughout this process, so I'm going to now just make the tweaks that I need to make to get this static mix that I already have sounding good. So I'll get into that in a moment. Firstly, I just wanted to show you a few new things because, as I mentioned in the opening, I've done a little bit of additional recording. So the first thing that was standing out for me was my lead guitar. It just did not sound good. So let's listen to what the lead guitar did sound like originally. We'll unmute that one. It was sounding like this. So the playing was sloppy, I didn't really like the tone. What I've done is I've used a similar sort of tone but without all the different changes to it, and now it's sounding like this. So it's just sitting nicer in the mix compared to the sound we had before, which was like this. It was sounding a bit harsh, and I think it was Ponk and maybe some others in the comments that was letting me know that that lead riff was just poking out too much. So by re-recording it a little bit more subtle and mellow, and the other thing I've done here is actually removed it from this first section. So if we play this part here, you'll hear that in the first chorus, we don't actually have the lead part. Birds, it's for the birds. So the first time around in the For the Birds, we just have the electric piano and the organ doing the sort of treble duties there. We don't have any guitar, which I think actually sounds a little bit better in my view. So that was a great suggestion, and I'm going to go with it. So it creates some variety too, because when it does come in that second verse, the second chorus, then it's a lot different and it's adding that variety. Anyway, that's my lead guitar. This one's been put to bed. We've added this one here. The next thing we did is I recorded some new vocals. So I wasn't 100% happy with my vocals. Here's the 2 original vocals, and you'll notice that they're now doing duty as my vocal double. So this is something I do quite often, is that if I've recorded a vocal that I'm happy-ish with, and then I record a second vocal, I'm like, yep, that's the one I want, I'll leave this one underneath as the double. So let's just go to the section here, and I'll show you what I mean by this. We'll just solo these 4 tracks and hit play. Different ways we choose to spend our time, and I know that there are differing priorities, but it seems that yours is stuck in 1982. So that's my new vocal down here, which I prefer. I used a dynamic mic, actually handheld. I just held onto the mic and sang, and that's the sound I got. But I've got my original condenser mic version here, and I'm just using these to sit underneath. And you'll remember maybe that there's a little crossover bit. So the reason we have 2 tracks is right down the end here, it crosses over on itself, so we need it to be on a separate track, but they are EQ'd and volume matched exactly the same. So that matches that, and that matches that at this point in time. So I'm going to go with that for now. You'll hear what that sounds like in the mix, but my new vocal is similar, but just sounds a little bit different. It's not as harsh and crispy because I've used the dynamic mic, and it just sits a little bit better in the mix, in my opinion. You can tell me otherwise. Again, that's what this is all about. The third and final change that I've made is Isabella is back. So I think it was Riley that suggested we needed the shaker back in this track, and I agree with that. So we have the pain leave behind Just a very simple shaker part there. We've then got another couple of slightly different parts down here. Look out for yourself. Just bring the bongo back in there, and then at the very end here, because you know what you always need? You always need more cowbell. So we've got some cowbell here at the end, which back at our mix, I think, adds a little bit of extra groove to this last section. Finding fault in things that don't align with what you want to hear. So yeah, just a little bit of something different. The other thing I did with the vocals here, I did for the birds again. So I've now got a left and a right for the birds. So at the end here, when these are playing out, it's for the birds. And I've realized that my right one has all that crazy echo on and my left one doesn't. So I'll probably have to, in fact, let's just do that now before I forget. We'll just duplicate that track. And what we're going to do is make sure it's this one that actually has it on. It's for the birds. No, it's not. It's my left one. Okay, so we'll just... I've done the wrong thing there then. We'll delete that. We want to duplicate this one, the left track, and then use those same settings for our right track so we get that same sound on both of those. Drop the volume because it was a little bit louder, and then delete this one. A little bit of editing to do here. Tap on this one, tap again, hit rename, and turn this back to our right, R-I-G-H-T, if I could spell right. And now if I solo these two suckers, it's for the birds. It's for the birds. And again, maybe that doesn't go through all the way there because really I wanted that on this last bit here, which is this. It's for the birds. So we may do some automation there and move those onto some tracks in the final mix, but for now we'll go with it. So they're the changes that we've made, and what we're doing now is we're going to go through this whole track. So I'll start playing through, and what I'll probably do is stop and pause as I'm going, as I'm making some adjustments, and let you know what I'm doing. And then when we get to the end, we'll play through the track as we've been doing all the way through, well, most of the way through after I got the suggestion from James to do so. So let's now, I'll hit play, we'll make sure that this balance is sounding good and this static mix is coming together, and as I said, I'll pause as we go and let you know what we're doing. And here's our first pause. One thing I did want to mention is you'll notice that I'm not doing automation at the moment. So I leave automation for my final mix. I'll make some notes about parts that I want to automate, but I won't do that in this particular video or at this time. These tracks do have automation on them because they're just these three samples that I've already automated just to make sure they sound like I want them to sound. But everything else I haven't. And the reason for that is you'll see here that because these are automated, they've now got that yellow circle, which means I can't adjust the volume. I have to make all my volume adjustments in automation, which I find a hassle. So I leave that right to the end. Anyway, let's continue. So there's the intro. As you know, I've been working on that throughout. So I've balanced out our drums here in the middle there. We've got our bassoon and our two string sections there. So that's all sounding good to me at the moment. And then we kick in with the rest of our instruments. So our piano comes in here. The upright bass is actually gone. We'll mute that one out. And we kick in with our guitars down here as well. So now we'll be listening to our guitar and our drum level. And we'll be listening for how that sits with the rest of the mix. So before we get into the vocals, you can hear the little electric piano comes in here. This is sitting over here on the right side and is up at that sort of volume. So again, it doesn't stick out, but it's just a nice little subtle change in the second half of the intro. The piano is one of the main driving instruments, so that's at a decent volume there. And our guitars are sitting at a sort of lower volume down here as well, not sort of too in the way. The same with our bass. We don't want to overload the bass because that's one of the problems I tend to have in GarageBand is I push the bass a little bit too hard and then it sounds way too bassy and then I have to EQ the whole track to remove some of the bass. So I'm leaving that a little bit subtle in this track. And finally, our acoustic guitar is sitting at about that volume as well. So everything I think is balanced up pretty nicely here. There might be a few tweaks and some automation that we need to do when we get to the final mix, but let's continue on with our static mix.
I think about the things you say are true. It gets me thinking about the different ways we choose to spend our time. And I know that there are differing priorities, but it seems that yours is stuck in 1982. And all the pain you worry about today, just leave behind. Just listen up and say it's for the birds.
Okay, so one thing I'm hearing is I'm not quite hearing enough acoustic, so... And I really like that acoustic sound, so let's just boost this acoustic and see if we can get it back up in the mix a little bit better.
Yours is stuck in 1982 and all the pain you worry about today, just leave behind. Just listen up and say it's for the birds. The birds.
Yeah, that's better. So just a subtle change, but I just wanted to make sure that that acoustic was coming through a little bit there. All right, now we've got our background vocals coming in now, so let's keep an ear out for those and make sure they're sitting at the right level, and all the rest of our instrumentation is kind of the same here.
It's for the birds. It's for the birds. One thing you always say is look out for yourself. Nobody else is gonna keep you safe and make you satisfied. And there's something that I just can't come to terms with. Protected from society and all the friends you dump along the way will all move on without you, and they'll say it's for the birds. It's for the birds. For the birds. And if you open up your eyes and look around, you'll start to find that you gave up.
So this part I wanted to make sure that that acoustic guitar is sitting up nicely in the mix because that's the main driving instrument for this part now. So I may need to automate that up a little bit in volume, but because we brought it up in the mix a bit, it's sounding okay.
Up the daily grind for something worse. Pretending that you are much better than the other people. Finding fault in things that don't align with what you want to hear. Believing everything that you were told when you were growing up. After all, your happiness is all that matters in the end. Rejecting others for the way that they decide to live their lives. Denying everything.
So there's that crossover point. Or you can hear the end of Isabella there. You can hear her playing some congos, which is very cool. I'm so glad she's back. I didn't like that we lost that percussion. I think we needed that little bit of percussion in here. Anyway, there's that crossover bit where we go from one vocal back to the other there to there. Oh, I've realised that we've cut off that part of the double there. Let me just come in here and see what this is actually playing.
So now it's time to start again.
Okay, so that bit's alright. Is it just the rest of it? Whoop, moved it away. Didn't want to do that. Tap. Oh, let's zoom in a little bit. This is getting a bit fiddly. This is where the iPad comes in handy, not the iPhone so much. Don't quite know what I've done there. I'm not going to focus on it because it's only the double and we don't really need it throughout that part. I think it's going to be okay. Let's just listen and make sure all these vocals are sounding all right through to the end here now.
You were told when you were growing up. After all, your happiness is all that matters in the end. Rejecting others for the way that
So there we go, and those for the birds there, I'm just having an idea as I go along here that what I might do is do some funky automation there. So one's on the left, one's on the right. I might do similar to what I did at the start here. Oh, we didn't talk about this. The automation on these, sorry, slight side note, the automation on these, you'll notice, is a lot more subtle now. So remember that crazy left and right panning that we had there? It still has that, but it's really, really subtle. So what I might do is a similar sort of panning with these for the birds at the end. So they kind of hit on the left for the birds, then on the right for the birds as we come into the end. But that's about it. So what else have I done here for this static mix? Well, not a whole lot, because as we talked about as we went along, I've used a lot of the settings. I've changed compression and EQ and volume and some other effects that I've put on here as I've been going along. So it means that we don't have a lot to do here. And that's probably one of the things I wanted to point out in this series, is that getting it right at the source, getting good recordings up front, the reason that we've spent, 25 days on recording and we're only spending the last sort of 5 days on mixing, mastering and releasing, is that that's about the ratio it should end up being. You don't want to, do all your recording and rush through that and get all your tracks and then sit down and do a month worth of mixing, because you're going to spend a lot of time just sort of playing and doing things and chopping and changing. If you can record using the sounds that you want, get it sounding really good, do your static mix and mix it as you go, you get to this point and you have a pretty good result. So we're going to leave it here for now. When I come back next time, we're going to do a few little edits, because there's a couple of spots here where we need to just chop out some spaces where there's some silence, or not so much silence, but instruments that are not playing, and we don't need that sort of background noise. We're going to do our final mix, which is going to involve our automation, and then we're going to move on and master this track. So that's going to involve some EQ on the master bus and playing around with a few mastering plugins. It's not going to be a massive job to master, because once again, all we want to do with the mastering is make sure that our level comes up and that it is radio ready in its sound. So it's going to sit nicely and play nicely with other tracks. So I'll show you how we can do that when we get to mastering. So this is it for now. As is tradition now, let's listen to this track end to end for the birds, the static mix. We are getting close here, folks. We are only a couple of episodes away from the point where we can finish and release this song. So as always, thank you for watching. Keep the feedback and the comments coming. As you heard in this video, a lot of the comments and feedback I've been getting have been used in the actual recording and mixing and process that I'm going through here. So keep those coming. We've still got a few days that we can get this finished off. So here we go. Here is our static mix of For the Birds.
Every time I think about the things you say are true, it gets me thinking about the different ways we choose to spend our time. And I know that there are differing priorities, but it seems that yours is stuck in 1982. And all the pain you worry about today, just leave behind. Just listen up and say it's for the birds. It's for the birds. It's for the birds. It's for the birds. One thing you always say is look out for yourself. Nobody else is gonna keep you safe and make you satisfied. And there's something that I just can't come to terms with, so you can keep yourself protected from society. And all the friends you dump along the way will all move on without you, and they'll say it's for the birds. It's for the birds. It's for the birds. It's for the birds. around, you'll start to find that you gave up the daily grind for something worse.